They never saw you first, not in the way that matters. You might have believed you were chosen once, maybe even convinced yourself your presence was valuable. But deep down, if you're being honest, you knew. You were never the fire they gravitated toward. You were the warmth they tolerated. Because somewhere along the line, someone taught you that being considerate was enough, that listening would earn affection, that showing up would win hearts. And maybe it should have been that way. But the truth? It rarely is. It stings, doesn't it? Watching the same script unfold over and over again. You stand there, steady, present, dependable, and she walks past you toward the man who doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, doesn't even care if she stays. And that choice, as irrational as it may seem, is repeated in thousands of lives, across cultures, through centuries. One of the few who saw it clearly was Arthur Schopenhauer. His views were harsh, often dismissed as outdated or cynical. But buried in that severity was a clarity no one else dared voice. That human connection, especially from the feminine side, is not built on intellect or virtue. It's anchored in something far more primal, something ancient, a force that bypasses reason and morality entirely. A drive that doesn't ask what's right. It only knows what feels inevitable. And then comes the man she can't ignore. The one who doesn't shrink back when challenged. The one who doesn't bend to expectations or wait to be invited. He doesn't ask if he's welcome. He takes up space because he knows he belongs wherever he stands. That presence alone sends ripples through rooms, wakes something sleeping in the hearts of those around him. He's not a villain, not a hero. He's just real. Unapologetically, uncontrollably real. It makes you angry, maybe. Or confused. Because you were told that character matters, that softness is strength, that empathy is magnetic. And it is, in a world that values it. But attraction doesn't follow the rules of civility. Desire is wild, chaotic. It favors the unpredictable. The ones who leave then return like they never left. The ones who pull away, who withhold certainty, who make hearts race not through affection, but through absence. Look around. The stories told in books, in music, in late-night confessions, they all circle back to the same archetype. The dangerous one, the troubled soul, the man she can't figure out, can't pin down, can't quite forget. Why? Because he unsettles her. Because he cracks through the surface and awakens parts of her she didn't even know were sleeping. And once awakened, she can't go back to sleep. You may think this is a call to become cold. It's not. It's a call to understand that without contrast, you don't stand out. Light is only interesting when it's flickering against shadow. Stability alone doesn't create longing. Predictability doesn't ignite obsession. The man who always says yes, who always waits, who never rattles her, he fades into the background, not because he's lacking, but because he doesn't spark the unknown. Schopenhauer, for all his flaws, captured a truth many would rather ignore, that women, for all their depth and complexity, often feel more than they reason, that their attraction leans not toward serenity, but toward intensity. It's not a defect, it's not brokenness, it's instinct. And if you want to be seen not as a safety net, but as a force, you must embrace the paradox that your decency means little if it comes without edge. She doesn't want to be rescued. She wants to be shaken, not hurt, shaken, rattled out of monotony, jerked awake from her own emotional slumber. Because the quiet man, the understanding one, is safe, but he doesn't challenge her. And that lack of challenge becomes a lack of chemistry. It's not personal, it's neurological, it's evolutionary. The modern man, for all his politeness and progress, has been trimmed down, taught to ask, to apologize, to hesitate, and in doing so he's become invisible. Meanwhile, the man who doesn't apologize, who moves without second guessing, is the one she remembers. Not because he's cruel, but because he's undeniable. We live in an age that praises equality, and rightly so, but desire doesn't care about slogans. Beneath the intellectual agreements, there's still that pull, that old biological whisper that says, follow the one who doesn't need you, because if you can hold his gaze, it means you matter. And if that truth offends you, good. It means you still care. It means part of you hasn't numbed out yet. But don't confuse this for cynicism. It's not bitterness, it's clarity, and clarity can set you free. The man she's drawn to is not necessarily cruel, but he's whole. He doesn't seek validation. He doesn't soften his edges for acceptance. His time is precious. His boundaries are sacred. He can give, but only when he chooses to. And that power, that refusal to be molded, is magnetic. When you give everything too easily, it doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like desperation, and no one is drawn to desperation, not for long. A man who anchors his worth in being needed is a man always at risk of being discarded. So what now? Do you throw away your kindness? Become cold, uncaring, transactional, number? But you must learn to temper your light with shadow. Learn to say no, learn to walk away. Learn that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not to stay, not to give, but to leave space. Because in that space, desire grows. Evolutionary biology has revealed this over and over. Female attraction leans towards status, confidence, command, not toward excessive availability. It leans into those who are centered, unmoved by chaos, grounded in their own presence. The woman will test. She will produce. She will challenge, not to destroy, but to measure. To see if the man before her is real, if he can hold his ground, if he can say no without guilt, if he can stay unmoved even when she storms. And if you pass those tests, not through manipulation but through presence, you earn something no words can buy, her respect, and from that respect love may grow. But don't fool yourself into thinking everyone earns that love. Most men don't, because most men are trying to be chosen, and in doing so they become choiceless. They shape themselves into whatever they think will be liked, and in doing so, they erase the very thing that might have made them unforgettable. Harsh? Absolutely. But necessary, because too many men are wasting time auditioning for a role that requires no actor, only a presence. Too many are rehearsing lines of loyalty, empathy, and patience, while the role was never about the words, but about the silence that speaks of certainty, of not needing applause to feel worthy. And that brings us to the cruelest irony of all. The one who doesn't chase becomes the one who's chased. Not because he plays games, but because he's already full. His life doesn't orbit her. He doesn't abandon his mission to orbit someone else's desires. He remains in motion, and it's that movement that creates the gravitational pull. When you give without edge, you become an option. When you love without limit, you become a fixture. And fixtures don't move hearts. They hold coats. You think you're being ignored because you're not enough. But the truth is, you're being overlooked because you gave yourself away without demand, without question, without boundaries. And in a world that craves contrast, you vanished in your consistency. What she seeks is not punishment, not cruelty, but a presence too powerful to manipulate. A man who will not fold. A man whose love is deep, but never dependent. Who will embrace, but never chase. Who will remain sovereign, even in intimacy. There's a part of her that wants fire, but only from the man who doesn't burn for her approval. Who keeps his warmth inside until he chooses to let it out. And until you learn that balance between stillness and motion, affection and distance, you will keep losing to men who appear colder, but are in fact simply more whole. Let's take it deeper. Think about trauma. Think about old wounds buried beneath polished smiles. Many people are drawn not to what heals them, but to what feels familiar. And for some women, that familiarity is chaos. They grew up around it. They learned to associate love with unpredictability. So when you offer peace, they feel nothing, not because you're lacking, but because you don't echo their past. That's the unspoken pain of trauma bonding. The cycle where pain and love get tangled, where a kind word feels foreign and a harsh silence feels like home, where calm is mistaken for dullness and drama is mistaken for passion. It's a wiring problem, one that can't be fixed from the outside. So when you try to prove your worth through gentleness, it bounces off the surface, not because you're doing something wrong, but because they're not wired to receive it, not yet. And that perhaps is the hardest truth to swallow, that you could be exactly what someone needs and still be invisible to them. But you're not powerless. You can rebuild, not by becoming someone else, but by returning to the part of yourself that never needed to be accepted to feel strong, the part that stood tall before love and will stand tall after it. You don't have to mimic the coldness of those who hurt, but you do have to learn to hold your warmth with discipline, because uncontrolled kindness becomes self-abandonment. And if you abandon yourself, don't be surprised when others follow suit. What you need is not more charm, not more patience, but more presence, the kind that doesn't beg to be seen, the kind that is undeniable, even in silence. You've spent too long making yourself easy to reach, only to realize no one's reaching. That version of you, the one who answers texts in seconds, the one who rearranges his world for someone else's schedule, the one who offers devotion before desire is even earned. He's tired, and for good reason. Because what he gave was real, but what he received was indifference dressed as appreciation. Somewhere along the way, you thought showing how much you care would be the golden key, that proving your heart was open, ready, willing, would invite someone to walk in and stay. But the door stayed open and the room stayed empty. Not because you weren't good, but because goodness without fire doesn't captivate. It comforts, but it doesn't pull. And that's what this is about. Not bitterness, not resentment, not revenge, but awakening. Realizing that what holds attention isn't just love, it's intensity, polarity, force. The kind of presence that makes people stop scrolling, stop searching, stop looking for the next thing, because they've found something they can't explain, only feel. The man who becomes magnetic is the one who stopped asking for directions. He doesn't need applause to confirm his value. He walks into rooms like he owns the air. Not because he's arrogant, but because he knows who he is even when no one's looking. That kind of man doesn't ask if he's enough. He assumes it. He doesn't wait to be wanted. He chooses, and in that choice, he becomes rare. The truth that most won't admit, especially not out loud, is that desire isn't rational. It's not polite. It doesn't care about your intentions. It responds to tension, to contrast, to unpredictability. And no matter how modern the world gets, some pieces of our wiring remain ancient. Some parts of attraction don't evolve. They just hide under surface expectations. That's why the man who knows how to balance affection with space, intensity with silence, closeness with detachment, he wins, because he's not swinging wildly between extremes. He's calibrated, not soft, not hard, just focused. He doesn't react to everything. He selects, and that selection makes his energy a rare commodity. What pulls someone in isn't how available you are, it's how contained you are, how you manage your time, your attention, your warmth. It's not about playing games. It's about having standards. Because the more you give indiscriminately, the less value it holds. And the less value it holds, the faster it gets discarded. Think of a man who walks into a room and doesn't need to say a word. He doesn't scan for validation. He doesn't hover for acknowledgement. His very presence says, "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here because I belong." That is gravity. That is the beast. And no, he wasn't born that way. He was built, forged by pain, by silence, by rejection, sculpted in moments when no one clapped, when no one cared, until he no longer needed them to. The men who become unforgettable are not always the most talkative, the most handsome, or even the most skilled. They are the ones who know how to disappear without losing themselves, who can step back and still be remembered, who can stay quiet and still be felt. You've been taught that being emotionally available is the highest form of love. And it can be. But when given too soon, too freely, without filtration, it becomes background noise. Emotion without edge gets tuned out. She says she wants honesty, but what she craves is presence. She wants to feel something. And if your love feels like ambient music, gentle, soothing, forgettable, it won't last. She'll find herself staring at her phone, wondering why you don't shake her, why you don't rattle the cage. And no, this doesn't mean becoming aggressive. It means becoming real. Real enough to stop over-explaining. Real enough to say no without softening the blow. Real enough to walk away when your peace is compromised. You think you lose her when you act too cold. But the reality is, you lose her when you act too safe. Safety without thrill is a pillow. Comfortable. Forgettable. She may lean on it, but she doesn't long for it. There's a part of her, whether she admits it or not, that longs to feel overpowered. Not controlled, not oppressed, but caught in a current she can't quite tame. That current is not your anger. It's your command. Your refusal to dilute your essence just to make her stay. And this is where so many men crumble. They think love means shrinking, making themselves smaller, nicer, softer. But all that does is sand down the very edges that made them desirable in the first place. When you remove the storm, you remove the soul. The man she remembers, the one she dreams about when everything feels too quiet, isn't the one who never upset her. It's the one who never flinched, who held the line, who didn't beg, who didn't chase, who showed up when it mattered and vanished when disrespected, who knew that absence can speak louder than words. But how do you become that man without turning bitter, without becoming the very thing you swore you'd never be? You start by building solitude, the kind that isn't lonely, the kind that refines, where you stop checking if she saw your message, where you stop sending paragraph-long explanations, where you start moving like you're enough even if she never replies again. That's not ego, that's alignment. Because the man who is in tune with himself doesn't fear silence. He makes it sacred. He doesn't fill voids with noise. He lets them echo until clarity emerges. And slowly, people notice. Not because you chase, but because you become still. Still enough to reflect. Still enough to intimidate. Still enough to attract without lifting a finger. This is why the beast is loved. Not because he roars, but because his quiet carries weight. Because he doesn't need to be seen to know he matters. And in a world of men trying to be noticed, the one who doesn't try becomes impossible to ignore. You want to be the man she aches for. Then stop being the one who always answers. Start being the one who pauses, who considers, who guards his energy like gold. Because if you don't treat your time and attention like they're valuable, no one else will either. Let go of the belief that patience always wins. Sometimes it's distance that does. Sometimes it's the man who steps back, not out of fear, but out of clarity, who ends up being the one she can't replace. And here's the irony that breaks the hearts of countless kind men. While you're busy proving your love, she's craving someone who doesn't need to prove anything at all. Someone whose existence alone is the proof, the living embodiment of direction, of restraint, of unshakable presence. It's not cruelty she's attracted to, it's contrast. She doesn't want to be hurt. She wants to be moved. And if your kindness doesn't stir her soul, she'll forget it like a pleasant dream after waking. This is where most lose the plot. They think the only options are cruelty or submission. But there's a third path, the path of the integrated man, the one who holds both tenderness and power, who can kiss softly and walk away sharply, who knows when to hold and when to release. He's the man who isn't owned by love. He participates in it, but it doesn't own him. He can love deeply, but never loses himself in the process. He gives, but never empties. That's the man women remember, not because he was the loudest, but because his silence changed the temperature of the room. So where does this leave you? It leaves you at the edge of a cliff. The moment before transformation, you can either retreat, go back to over-explaining your value, chasing half-hearted interest, apologizing for your strength, or you can leap. You can bury the version of you that needed to be picked and give birth to the man who chooses, who doesn't need anyone's confirmation to know he's worthy, who doesn't crumble when someone walks away because his foundation isn't built on sand, it's carved into stone. Do you know why some men never get forgotten? It's not the money, not the body, not even the looks. It's their refusal to fold, their unwavering sense of self. That's what haunts memory. That's what lingers in dreams. Be that man, not out of revenge, but out of rebirth. You don't need to be cold to be powerful, but you do need to stop bleeding for those who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You do need to stop softening your voice just to be heard. Stand tall in your silence, in your choices, in your stillness, because still waters run deep, and depth is rare. The beast they chase is not a myth. He's a man who went through fire and didn't lose his form, who was overlooked, laughed at, left behind, and turned that pain into poise. He's not desperate. He's deliberate, not distant, just focused. So become that man, the one who doesn't need a crowd to roar, the one who can sit alone in a room and still feel whole, the one who is no longer defined by who loves him, but by how fully he loves himself. And if this message touched something in you, then let that fire spread. Let it push you to rise, not as a reaction to the world, but as a declaration of who you truly are. Because at the end of the day, the most attractive man is not the one who adapts, is the one who leads, who knows where he's going, who walks ahead and trusts that whoever's meant to walk beside him will catch up. That's the secret. That's the alchemy. Don't beg. Don't chase. Evolve. And let the world recalibrate around the version of you they never saw coming. Stay untamed. Stay sovereign. Stay undeniable. Because when you stop waiting to be chosen, you become the choice. And that is what changes everything.